Welcome to the Daily Plunge. We are in the prophet Jonah, chapter 1, starting at verse 17 through chapter 2, all of chapter verse 10. Now, after he gets thrown off the boat because Jonah said he would rather die than obey God, it says the Lord sent a fish to swallow him up. And at first, this is not grace, this is the law. He has been swallowed up by death. And in fact, even though it says, then I began to pray. Well, when did he begin to pray? Because he didn't start praying at first. He's in there, that smelly, horrible fish for 3 days. And he is undergoing this horrible death. It's a certain and imminent death. And he is dying all these 3 days. It feels like he's going through death and hell. But of course, he did reject God and say he would rather die than be with the Lord. And so the thing is it does say he began to pray. And we must, above everything else, cry out to God when we are in the midst of despair and adversity. God commands it. We're not supposed to spend our time moaning and groaning and complaining to God and blaming God for what we're going through, but rather to cry out to him for his aid. And God cannot help himself to hear our cries, the cries of his children, and it is his divine goodness cannot restrain itself from giving help and aid, because this is who God is. This is his character. As Jesus said, if you know how to give good things to your children, how much more would your Father in heaven give good things to those who cry out to him? And so, we are to lift up our hands and pray to God that he would come to our aid. Now, Jonah blames God. He said, you hurled me into the depths, into the very heart of the sea. No, wait a minute. Didn't you ask to get thrown off the boat by the sailors? Yeah. And so, but Jonah is blaming God. He's saying that God is using the waves and the fish and everything to inflict his wrath upon Jonah, which actually is sort of true. That is happening. But, even though death is working on Jonah, and it works on people, right? Instead of instead of being sunk in our despair, and then turning to God, so many folks would rather, they despise God and they will not go to him in prayer. But Jonah finally does, right? He says, all this is happening to me. I have been banished from your sight. Well, you wanted to be banished. He says, will I ever again see the temple? Maybe not if you die in the fish. The engulfing waters are threatening me. I'm going to sink down to the roots of the mountains. I'm never going to get out of here. I'm going to be so far below the earth, is what he's saying, right? And then in verse 6 comes the gospel, but. Here is the gospel, right here. But you, Lord my God, brought me up out from the pit. There's the gospel. There's the good news. God changed everything. And when my life was ebbing away, the Spirit reminded me of the Lord, and I cried out, and my prayer rose to you, and it sped to your holy throne room, and you lifted me out. And those who cling to worthless idols, those who put their hope in their own vain efforts, they miss out on God's mercy and love. But I, because of faith, this is a faith but, as opposed to the unbelievers, I'm going to shout to you with praise, because salvation comes from God alone. Only God can do this, and I am grateful. This is a great passage to read. Thanks, friends. Have a blessed day.